Hi, everybody. How are you? I hope you're having a very good day today, as I am. I certainly want to take this opportunity to say thank you for tuning in once again to another episode of TJ's Topics. I'm certainly glad to see you. And of course, you know who I am. I am TJ. And it is certainly a pleasure to be with you on this beautiful day. Thank you so much for tuning in and always being a part of my little audience. I am truly grateful. I'm very appreciative. Thank you so much. Now, before I get into today's topic, I better warn you that there is some language that will be discussed in today's topic that you could possibly find offensive. Now, if you are one who is offended by certain words and particularly profanity, then you may not need to go any further watching this video. You need to just go ahead on and turn it off right now and save yourself a lot of trouble. And I think you'll be better off if you did. However, if you're not bothered by it, then please feel free to continue watching. Because what I want to discuss today for the next few minutes is something that I wasn't sure if I wanted to talk about it. However, I gave it a second thought and a third thought. And I decided that I would go ahead and discuss it. Because if I don't do it now, there's no telling when I'll do it. I probably wouldn't do it. And they said, don't put off until tomorrow what you can do today. Therefore, I decided I would go ahead and do it today. So my topic for today is sapsuckers. And I think that's a term that most of us are familiar with. We've heard that term our whole lives, sapsuckers. And we've heard it used on many occasions in many different contexts. But now let me ask you this. The last time you heard somebody use the word sapsucker, do you remember exactly what they were referring to or what they meant by it? You know, I have heard that term used my entire life, ever since I was knee high to a ladybug. and usually every time I heard someone use that term, they were referring to an individual. Now, as I get into this discussion, I'm going to tell you exactly what it is, and then you can decide for yourself whether you want to continue using it, or you can think back. You may have to go back a few months or a few years or a few decades, but think back to the time when someone may have called you a sapsucker and how it made you feel. It probably didn't make you feel good, because there are many names that people have called us throughout childhood and adolescent and even as a young adult, that once we learned later on what those terms meant, we didn't feel too good by it. I can think of many a term that I've been called from childhood all the way through my teenage years, adolescence, and even as a young adult. Names that I've been called that when I look back now, I couldn't believe that they actually called me those names. And I wonder why they did it. Perhaps it was something that they saw in me that made them think that I was the name that they called me, or perhaps it was a demonstration of their own ignorance. Usually, when people call us names, they are referring to us as those names simply because they are that themselves. And they have to project that image of themselves onto others. That's usually what it is. Anytime we see or call someone a name or refer to them as a a bad term or whatever, something derogatory, that signifies what's going on in our spirits. It's something on the inside of us that we see in ourselves, that we point out in other people. And that's usually what it is. So, and I didn't know that when I was growing up because I had to grow into this understanding. And back then I didn't have that understanding, and I grew up around people who didn't have that understanding because remember, being a part of the last generation of children who grew up without the internet, we didn't have the luxury of Googling anything. There was no Google when I was growing up. My first exposure to Google was in college in the late 90s, 1998 to be exact. But prior to that, there was no Google. We didn't have internet and stuff like that. Therefore, we couldn't look up the meanings of words unless we used a dictionary. And we had encyclopedias, of course. So that's what I want to talk about for the next few moments. Sapsuckers. Now, what is a sapsucker? First, I'm going to give you the dictionary meaning of the word. A sapsucker is an American woodpecker that pecks rows of small holes in trees and visits them for sap and insects. And I'm sure that many of you out there have seen trees in your yard or in other people's yards where it looks like they got all these tiny little holes going around the large branches that extend from the trunk of the trees. And I've seen this. Matter of fact, I see it a lot at my parents' house. They have trees. There's this one particular tree in the yard, a pecan tree, and woodpeckers have been all over that tree. And I can see all these little holes around the tree. Woodpeckers do that. They love to peck wood. Looking for sap, and they're trying to find bugs that they can eat. That's the nature of a bird, especially a woodpecker. And they call them a sapsucker. Now that's the dictionary term, the dictionary meaning of the term. But there's a slang meaning of it as well. Now that's gonna lead me into what I'm trying to get to in just a moment. The slang meaning of sapsucker. A yellow-bellied sapsucker. And that's a bird, actually. It's a bird. He has a yellow belly. Those are his feathers. And, there are many birds out here that have such beautiful colors. Well, this yellow-bellied sapsucker is one of them, has such pretty colors. However, a yellow-bellied sapsucker takes on a slang term or slang meaning, and it means someone whom you don't like. You may refer to him as a yellow-bellied. Now, what about yellow-bellied? Now, I'm sure that most of you have heard that as well. Now, the term yellow-bellied can refer to someone who's a coward, someone who is just, they call him what do you call a yellow may call him and besides a yellow belly, they call him a yellow back or something like that. You've all heard that. He's sort of scary, timid like. This word originally applied to birds that literally have a yellow belly, like the yellow-bellied sapsucker. From there, it came to mean an insult for cowards. And I think we all know someone who has played the role of a coward. Some of us have been cowards ourselves. I know I have in various situations. Did it feel good to be called a coward? Of course not. It never feels good to be called anything mean and derogatory. So if it doesn't feel good, then why do people resort to doing that? Like I said, anytime people call us names, whatever those names are, it usually indicates that there is something on the inside of them that's not right. But they have yet to deal with it. Oftentimes people don't know how to deal with their own insecurities because, they've been brought up believing that if they don't do a certain thing or they don't behave a certain way, if they don't conduct themselves according to societal norms and the standards of the people in their community, then they're seen as less than. They're not viewed as being a person with value. And in the Black community, it's even worse. Oh my God. I don't even have time to discuss all of the mess. I'm talking about pure crap that goes on in our community with regards to name calling. But let me get on with the next one because this is the one that I really want to get to, and it's going to help me make my point. The Urban Dictionary definition of the word sapsucker. Now, again, if you are offended by any profane terms, now is the time to cut it off before I get to it. Sapsucker. A person not high in social status, and we know a lot of people like that. In essence, lame, loser, chump, punk, etc. And I have been referred to many of these names. I've been called lame. I've been called a loser, a chump. Matter of fact, I had a co-worker when I was working at the junior high school where I was years ago. Now, he may have been playing about it, but oftentimes I couldn't tell if he was playing or if he meant what he said, or if he was serious. But he used to come down the hall sometimes. Now, I was the custodian in the school, had been there for 7 years. And his classroom was one of the classrooms that I took care of. And, but, he would call me a chump sometimes. And I tried to laugh about it, just play it off. But until I really got to know him and find out more about him, I felt offended by it, and I sort of felt bad, because he was this sort of upstanding guy in the school. He was not only a teacher, but at the time, he was an assistant football coach as well as the head basketball coach. He was a muscular dude, tall and well built. And, and he was a ladies' man. Women kind of went wild for him in a sense. Basically, he could woo a woman simply by smiling or looking at her a certain way or, putting his charm on her. And to go even further, if a boy's mother wanted her son to be on the basketball team, all she had to do was get in bed with him, and her son would automatically be on the team. So he had a way with women. And that's something that I never had. I didn't have it then, and I don't have it now. And so therefore he called me a punk, and he called me a chump rather, but I have been called a punk too by folk. But you know what? I don't that stuff doesn't bother me anymore, because I realize that it's not what you're called, but it's what you answer to that counts. Like I said, I'm just thankful that I made it through all of that. Because karma, they say, is a bitch. And I've learned that I've had enough experiences in my life to know that we create our own karma. And every day we see people out here doing things to others, not realizing that the crap that they dish out on other people is going to eventually come back to them. And it's going to come back 7 times worse than how they dished it out. But they're not thinking about that when they're dishing it out. That's the thing. Now, we're still talking about sapsuckers. Now, the term sapsucker can also refer to a very nasty person. Sometimes, if you call someone a sapsucker, that's the nice way of calling them for lack of a better term, a motherfucker. When you call somebody a sapsucker, you're trying to go around calling them something worse. And to be called a motherfucker, that is the absolute worst. But understand this. People often use this term in an effort to not come across as being excessively rude or disrespectful, as they would if they called someone a motherfucker. However, in other countries, they actually consider calling someone a sorry sapsucker as one of the harshest things to label a person. Now, here in America, it seems as if we've gotten to the point where name calling is the order of the day. And I think we have the previous administration, led by the previous president, to thank for that. Number 45. I'm talking about Donald Trump. When he came into power back in 2016, he made it his business to nickname everybody according to how he saw them. He had names for every one of his opponents. And even today, he still resorts to name calling. Well, under all the previous presidents, we didn't see a whole lot of name calling and stuff. We didn't see all these terms being thrown around everywhere and stuff. But now we do, ever since Trump was in the White House. And it seems as if we've been without a sensible president for so long until, man, I tell you, it's crazy, But again, it seems like it has become the norm. And name calling and all that stuff, it seems to be popular now, Even back when we used to watch Jerry Springer and we watched Maury and all these talk shows that we grew up watching, Ricky Lake, and Jenny Jones, all these good old talk shows we used to watch back in the 90s and the 2000s. People called each other names, and they threw all kinds of slang terms out there, and on some of them they even threw their fists. Yep. And so I tell you, it's ridiculous. I don't know what to say. But I've been called a lot of names myself. But going back to motherfucker, I've definitely been called that. Matter of fact, I've been called that more than a few times by a bunch of country white boys. You know, driving along in my car, and I've had several cars over the years, but apparently I wasn't driving fast enough or whatever, and I could read their lips. And they looked over at me, and apparently they were pissed off, and they called me a stupid motherfucker. I could read their lips and saw exactly what they were saying. And then verbally, they called me that. Matter of fact, one day when I was turning in the grocery store parking lot, a white boy called me a stupid motherfucker. Of course, it didn't bother me. I mean, it is what it is. And when you look at the history in this country, particularly between different ethnicities and stuff, between black folks and white folks, it's always been something. I mean, you would think that this far into the 21st century, these type of things wouldn't still be happening. But lo and behold, they are. When will it end? I have no idea. I know for us who are alive at this moment, it'll end upon our transition to the other side. But in the meantime, this is what we have to contend with. So I want to ask you today, have any of you out there ever been referred to as a sapsucker? Have you ever been called a punk or a sissy or a faggot or a chump or anything else that you felt was degrading and totally disrespectful? Have any of you ever been looked down on by your enemies? And we've all had enemies before. Some of us have enemies right now. We may not know exactly who they are, but they're out there somewhere. We call them our haters. That's what they are. They're haters. They can't stand us. I've worked with a number of haters over the years, and I've also attended church with haters as well. Those are the worst ones, to be exact, because they put on this front like they live loud and hallelujah and thank you Jesus and all that, but on the inside they're full of shit. They are absolutely no good whatsoever. And sometimes when you have an encounter with people like that, you simply want to walk up to them and slap the taste out their mouth and go on about your business. But then you think about, if you do that, then there are repercussions behind that. There are consequences that you have to face because, as I said before, karma has a way of, you know, balancing out. I remember Bob Barker said that on The Price is Right a long time ago, during the Showcase Showdown. Fate has a way of balancing things out in our lives. And that was true what he said. And I think most of us who are over 40, and those of us who are not quite 40 yet, but are getting close, we've lived long enough to know that not only is karma real, and what goes around comes around, but whatever we go through in life, there's always some kind of way where things will balance out. If there's a bad situation that we're dealing with, then eventually there's going to be a good situation to come along right behind it. So things have a way of balancing out in our lives. Fate, that is. So that is true. So that concludes my discussion on sapsuckers. And if you've ever been called a sapsucker or even played the role of a sapsucker in your lifetime, then I'm sure that you've learned lessons from that experience, as I have as well, because I've been on both sides of the coin. I have, I really have. And I wouldn't feel right sitting on here talking about this subject if I haven't lived this experience. And I've lived it. So therefore, I'm authorized to talk about it. And I have the authority to speak on this because, I've been there. And experience is indeed the best teacher. So with that being said, I would like to thank you for tuning in to me once again. And thank you so much for watching today's episode of TJ's Topics. Again, I invite you to like, subscribe, and comment on this video or any other videos that I've posted in the past. And feel free to share with your family and friends and whoever else you think may benefit from this discussion. I certainly do appreciate your time and thank you once again for your love and support. I tell you, I'm truly grateful. Until next time, this is Taryn Jerome Harris, reminding you that every round goes higher and higher. And I certainly look forward to seeing you again on the next go round. I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.